that I wish people would know is that before you're going to have open heart surgery, before you're going to have a stent, if you've had a heart attack, there is an option. You don't need to have another surgery. You don't need to have another heart attack. You don't need to have another stroke. There is an alternative.
So we have done a huge, what I think a landmark study. It's called the TEC trial. It was a trial to assess chelation therapy. And after 10 years, the study has just come out. And it has shown that yes, chelation therapy is A, safe to do, and B, it actually makes a big difference or significant difference for people with cardiovascular disease. This study has come out last week, and I'm very surprised to see that the media has not taken this in a positive spin. They have actually tried to diminish the results of the study.
You know, stay on the medicines that we tested, we're right. But if you add chelation, especially in diabetics, 39% reduction in events. If you had a heart attack in the front part of the heart, 37% reduction. It's a huge numbers. On top of the therapy you're already on, you know, people need to just know there is an option.
But somehow I was off the chart as far as blood was concerned. So one of the early programs that they initiated for us was to begin a chelation regimen to help remove the lead.
The study was designed to be the definitive result of chelation. One way or the other, we did the study as big as we could to prove it either worked or it didn't. We proved it worked. Now, it's 4 days later today. Even today, they came out with a roundtable discussion with 6 of the so-called experts of the American Heart Association to discuss the chelation study. Now, what's interesting in those 6 people is that none of them participated in the study. None of them do chelation. None of them really know what chelation is. So why would the American Heart Association present an expert panel with no experts on the panel as far as doing chelation or using chelation or having had experienced chelation or even having done the trial?
I think it is shameful that when you have delivered the Hippocratic Oath, which we all do at the end of our training, where you swear you will protect the life in front of you, and then you omit evidence, you omit the truth about things that can actually help, it's disgusting to me. I'm disgusted.
A lot of the articles immediately come out, you know, lesson learned. What is that? What about 26% benefit? You know, no to chelation message rings through. Why is that the conclusion of a study that shows a 26% benefit? Reduce death, reduce heart attacks, reduce hospitalizations, reduce surgeries, reduce stroke. And then you write that. That's, you know, cardiovascular business. Gee, you think that could have something to do with it?
There's been a lot of controversy about chelation therapy. EDTA has been around for 50 years, so you're not going to make much money with it. So most doctors say, well, when you do chelation therapy, you're doing something that hasn't been proven clinically. And when you talk about proven clinically, we would like to see a double-blind, placebo-controlled study. Before TEC, there was no such large study. It was also very difficult to do this study because patients had to receive 40 3-hour-long IV treatments. And half of the patients received water. The patients nor the doctors knew who was getting what. It was double-blind. So it's quite a lot to ask from someone to sign up with a study, to come 40 times for IV infusions lasting 3 hours each, not knowing if you're getting the real deal or not. Very difficult. When I moved here 4 years ago, and I had a practice in Miami before this, and we did a study there. And I had many patients coming in that were interested in participating, but then when they found out that there was a 50% chance that they would not receive the actual chelation treatment, they were not willing to come into the study, but they ended up becoming my chelation patients, so they just came for chelation therapy. Let's say if we would have looked at people that only have hypertension, that might become heart patients, that might have heart attacks in the future, what would happen if we would have looked at those patients? But we looked at patients already pretty sick, already bad arteries, already having had a heart attack, and we had to put these patients on maximum medical therapy. What does it mean? That means that all the patients in both the group that received water and the group that received chelation therapy, all these patients had to take statin drugs, they had to take aspirin, they had to take blood pressure medication. So they already received the maximum medical therapy that conventional medicine has to offer. And then we looked in these patients, what happens if we give them chelation therapy in addition? And in this group, we saw an 18% improvement, which then becomes quite significant in the patients. And for the diabetic patients, the 30% of these patients were diabetic patients, there was a 40% improvement. And that is huge. That is something that the media should have really caught on to and made a statement about, because there is no drug that I know that can make that much of a difference. It means that 40% of these patients didn't need to get a revascularization procedure, meaning they didn't have to get a new stent placed or angioplasty, a balloon angioplasty, or an open heart surgery. And that is a huge difference, a huge significance in life improvement of life, and also monetary wise is a huge difference. And that's where the clincher might be. It also makes a huge difference for people that make money on doing these procedures, and the hospitals that make money on doing these procedures. I hate to say it, but that's the way medicine has become.
Right, so Sunday is the large American Heart Association meeting, which is the biggest meeting of cardiologists. 19,000 cardiologists attend this meeting, and that's where all major research findings are presented. So any new drugs, any new treatments, anything like that is presented at the meeting. And that's why we go, to hear what's the latest treatments, and then different people present, their studies. So we've been working on the TAC trial, the chelation study, for 12 years, and we didn't know the results. So I felt, that at this meeting they're going to present, and we're finally going to find out, if it's good or not. So I flew to Los Angeles, where the meeting was at the convention center, and I sat in the audience. The audience is like 10,000 seats. It's a giant, it's like 4 ballrooms of seats. It's just an ocean of people. And, the meeting started at 1 o'clock, but the president just, they give out awards, and they talk about the sort of the global, just globally how big heart disease is. I mean, people don't realize 1 out of 2 people will die of heart disease. So pretty much 50%. And if you look at heart disease, cancer, and auto accidents, 98% of people will die that way, especially once you're over 35. That's really the way that people die. So it's the number one way. And the American Heart Association, in their mission statement, is to eradicate heart disease. That's like what it's supposed to be about. So I went to the meeting, and I felt that if the study was good, all the newspapers and media outlets in the country would run that as the lead story. Because already when we first started the study, we were in all the newspapers to get people to enroll. And the announcements of the meeting were already saying the biggest studies are the chelation study and this other study comparing bypass against stents to see which one was better. So those are like the 2 biggest stories in the whole meeting. So I go to the meeting, I sit in the first row, and I know, and it was to be a 10-minute presentation. So I knew Dr. Lamas at 4:36 was going to present, the study. So he goes up, and he starts the trial, the chelation study, how we designed it, how we enrolled all the centers, who were the patients that were in it. Basically, you had to be over 50 years old, and you had to have had a heart attack. And there were 2 groups. So one group got chelation, and one group got pretend chelation or placebo. And he showed the slide of what the placebo people did. So basically, they had 40% of events. And then I knew in that moment that the next slide was going to be positive or negative. So my heart stopped that second. and it seemed like time froze. And then he put the slide. It was like 18% benefit. Yes! And I'm like really happy. I look around. Everybody's like, I'm like, okay. So he went on to, so it's 18% benefit. Then the subcategories he showed, the biggest benefit was in diabetics. There was a 40% decrease events in diabetics. It was like 20% decrease in heart attacks, 20% decrease in death, 20% decrease in having to go to the hospital, 20% decrease in needing surgery. So basically all the things we looked at, each individually was helped and overall was helped. So it was better than I'd imagined. So the results are, I thought maybe one thing was good and maybe one thing was not good. So it was conflicting. That sometimes happens in studies. Every single thing was good. All 5 things we looked at was good. So I was like very excited. So his presentation ended, so it was just 10 minutes, and then somebody else went up to comment on the findings. Now that's a little strange because I'm like, who is it? The person was not involved in our study. He doesn't know anything about chelation. Who is this guy? So he goes up and he's basically a representative of the American Heart Association, a physician, and he comments on the study. And his bottom line comment was that the American Heart Association is not at this time going to recommend chelation therapy based on the results that showed that chelation works. It just took $30 million, 130 hospitals, 12 years to get a result. And then this person goes up and says, well, we're not going to recommend anything based on these results. I was like, why'd you say that? So then Dr. Lamas comes off the podium and I go up, to congratulate him. I'm like, Tony, congratulations, you did it. And he goes, that was interesting. And he just sort of walks by and I'm like, and no other people in the audience do chelation. Nobody. So it was only, I was there and then my friend from Mayo Clinic in Rochester was there. So Francisco, what'd you think? He goes, yeah, fantastic, wow. But that was it. So Tony, Dr. Lamas, Francisco, me, 3 out of like 10,000 cardiologists in the audience. As far as we knew, are the only people that did chelation in that group. So it's like, So I sit down, I'm like, I go outside, I call my wife, I call my friends. Yeah, the study's positive, we're gonna. So then we had a meeting at 7:30 for the investigators. So basically about 10 of the people who actually did the study met with Dr. Lamas to go over the results and what happened. So I went over there and I talked to him. I'm like, what happened? And he's like, basically what he said to me was, it is what it is. These, they have, based on the results, they have made these recommendations requiring more studies before they can fully recommend chelation therapy.
Chelation therapy is not a topic that cardiologists really discuss. As I mentioned, they know, I would say, almost nothing about chelation therapy. Overall, nor is it ever taught in medical school or we have any experience in it.
Can you tell me what you know about chelation therapy?
Well, like most cardiologists, very little. It was a concept, chelation therapy is a concept that was started, I believe, around the 50s, where it was thought that since calcium played a role in the atherosclerosis or hardening of the arteries, by binding calcium by whatever agent, be it EDTA or anything, you would lower calcium levels and with the hope of reducing the incidence of atherosclerosis or hardening of the arteries. But overall, I would say almost all cardiologists have minimal experience with this, with chelation therapy. No, I did not participate in the TACT trial. the TAC trial was a very large, multi-center, multinational, meaning many countries were involved, study utilizing chelation therapy. If I remember correctly, they studied over 1,700 patients and they followed them for about 4 years. I would only use chelation therapy if there was an acute problem, be it mercury poison or something like that, where there's acute end organ damage and you need to reverse it as quickly as possible. That would be the only situation that I would use it. I would not use it to prevent any events or anything like that.
My understanding was that the NIH TAC results showed 18% improvement with heart disease, 39% improvement with diabetic heart disease, and a 23% improvement with myocardial infarctions. Can you tell me how you interpret that?
Well, the main thing was there was a reduction in the need for revascularization. By that I mean having to go invasively and try to open a coronary artery. After the TAC trials results have come out, I've looked at some of the information, some of their findings. I still feel exactly the same way after the data is presented and published as I did before.
All the patients received everything we can give them today. And the addition of chelation meant that 1 out of 5 people didn't have to have a bad event. So basically, if you look at, there's over...
When you say event, what does event mean?
Yeah, so event means either death, so you can prevent deaths, you can prevent heart attacks, you can prevent the need for surgery, you can prevent strokes, and you can prevent the need to go to the hospital. So 1 out of 5 people in 5 years can be helped, in addition to everything else we can do, which is a huge jump of people that can be helped with basically a simple sort of treatment. It's not invasive, it doesn't hurt, it doesn't cost that much relative to what other things cost.
What does it cost?
Yeah, so it's usually between $3,000 and $5,000. So basically each infusion is about $135. The typical course is anywhere between 30 and 40 infusions. In the study we did once a week. People can do up to 3 times a week. When a new drug comes out, even a 1% benefit. So in the drugs we use for heart attacks, a 1% benefit led to TPA being used across the nation. Now we have an 18% benefit. Every cardiologist in the United States should be going, look, you're on this therapy. If we do this extra therapy, 1 out of 5 people will be saved. The director of the American Heart Association of the meeting, his opinion was Dr. Antman was stronger than the results of the study. The lead article should have been, the results show 18% benefit, 40% benefit in diabetics. Instead, the lead article was Dr. Antman's opinion of the study is that chelations shouldn't be recommended at this time. How did that happen?
Who benefits the most from that?
I think the biggest, the way the chelation study was done was through the government. So the government sponsored it. Not typically, let's say we have a new drug we want to produce. The pharmaceutical company would go to a university center to design a study to show, to study the drug. If the drug has a benefit, then they announce it at the meeting, and then everybody starts using the drug. That's typically how it goes. Because we did a study outside of the pharmaceutical industry of a drug that's basically the main element is generic. So there's no drug company that's going to benefit. Dr. Gordon, who is the sort of the father of chelation, the way we practice it now, he finally wrote an article at, I guess, late yesterday, saying that, he put the results, benefit, 18%, biggest benefit in diabetics, and that he expected this sort of reaction. So he's been fighting, with people against chelation for 40 years, 30 years. He's the one he originally wrote the protocol we use when we mix the bags. And he was the co-founder of the Chelation Society, which is called ACOM today.
Most doctors, and in my medical school, you can have a little bit of lead, it's no big deal. But, a little bit and a little bit, when it comes to toxins, let's say a safe number, and again, every so many years, they lower the number that they deem safe on top of that. But let's say that the safe number is 2 for lead. And for mercury, it is 3. And for uranium, it's 1. I'm just plucking out some numbers here. When it comes to toxins, they are synergistic. And what it means is that 2 plus 3 is not 5. 2 plus 3 might be 8 or 9. And this is something that we do not think about. Okay? With the increase in toxins that we measure, there are other toxins that we are not even measuring. But the increase in toxins that are just heavy metals, plastics, pesticides, the toxic effect of our environment when it comes to radiation effects, of what they call the effect from the cell phones, from your computers, all of that gives a toxic effect on the body, increases the body burden, and makes it more difficult for our cells to function optimally. And that's the bottom line. When cells don't function optimally, they are not able to clear their trash. They're not able to produce the hormones, the chemicals that they need to produce to make everything work. So toxins to me are like little spikes in the wheels. And your body is full of little wheels, cogwheels, that work together. And a toxin is like a spike. It stops the wheel from turning.
I've had 3 different types of cancer: prostate, polycythemia, and a parotid gland in my face. So my wife and I talked one night, and I told her that if I follow this regimen that she's proposing, I'll be dead in a year. And so we decided, and on my mind, I think the chelation therapy.
If you look at the history of medicine, I mean, it's a common theme of things being suppressed. I put in the book the obstetricians would not wash their hands between births, and they had like in 1850 something. So there was this massive increase in number of deaths of women having children. The midwives came in, and they would wash their hands between births, and the mortality, the number of women who died giving birth was way, way lower. And they presented that. And the main doctor who pushed to get the obstetricians to wash their hands ended up being ridiculed, and it took, I think, 30 years for that to become implemented.
The conflict.
Right.
Or the resistance.
Right, I could understand it there. It's like, okay, we're going against what you're doing. I could see them wanting to fight that. But we, on purpose, we're like, look, let's not make a war, let's build a bridge. And that was the whole focus. Let's build a bridge between what we know and what else we can do. And even doing it that way, it's still no.
And I've always said toxins lead to inflammation, and inflammation can then lead to either heart disease, arthritis, dementia. I mean, it has different ways of causing a problem. So if we start to prove that toxins are, after all, the underlying problem, we have to look at all other disease states and see what toxins do there.
When I came here, they tested for heavy metals, and I had elevated lead and mercury, and subsequently we found aluminum. For years I had a really rapid heart rate, and a doctor about 10 years ago when we first moved here sent me to a cardiologist.
A lot of my patients tell me that story. It's a very similar story.
I've always had blood sugar that sort of hovered around 90, which is sort of close to the threshold for diabetes. I think my whole endocrine system would have just gotten worse and worse. And I don't know what would have happened.
When people say silver fillings, they're actually mercury fillings. And each filling releases 12 micrograms of mercury per filling per day, even if you had them 30 years. And that accumulates in the body. So the effects of, there's actually a video that shows how, where it affects is the nerve, our nerve fibers are like wires. So the wire has a plastic sheath and it has the metal. The mercury removes the plastic sheath.
Shown here is the neurite of a live neuron isolated from snail brain tissue, displaying linear growth due to growth cone activity. It is important to note that growth cones in all animal species, ranging from snails to humans, have identical structural and behavioral characteristics and use proteins of virtually identical composition. In this experiment, neurons also isolated from snail brain tissue were grown in culture for several days, after which very low concentrations of mercury were added to the culture medium for 20 minutes. Over the next 30 minutes, the neurite membrane underwent rapid degeneration, leaving behind the denuded neurofibrils seen here.
So the signal gets a little bit scrambled. And that's part of, if you heard, so Mercury, he was mad as a hatter. So that came from the hatters used to work with mercury. And, he's a mercurial person. That's the effects of mercury.
So I started with a certain number of, certain level of metals. My highest was lead. But I did have other things, they just weren't as large.
Lead, again, lead being the biggest, lead's in the air, it's in the water, because food concentrates air and water, it's in the food. So that's our biggest sources of lead. And genetically, it's difficult for us to remove lead. The liver has trouble removing lead. And as that lead accumulates, like I said, each cell's little battery energy center gets affected by the lead. So you're not able to produce as much energy, the cells don't work as well, and the most susceptible cells are brain. So definitely lead has been shown to lower IQ, especially in children when the brain's developing, and lead can affect the heart vessels, so the blood vessels, so high blood pressure, and it also affects the hormone system. And that's where we're most susceptible. So as toxins accumulate over time, your hormones aren't able to work as well.
I started working with Eastern Airlines in 1967, and it was hard to get it off. Like when we got home, we all had to shower and wash our head. All our clothes would stink of smoke, and which I didn't know then. I don't think anybody knew that was going to cause all this damage that it did.
Everybody has cancer cells always. If you take me now and slice me up, there's some cancer cells in there. And the key is our immune system can clear those cancer cells. So on a biochemical level, the immune system's job is to find the cancer cell and get rid of it. The immune system's energy comes from this mitochondria, and that's really where the toxins affect. They suppress our immune system, they suppress our ability to form hormones, and then you see people start to get allergies, and then they start getting high blood pressure and diabetes because they can't form enough insulin, and then 3-5 years down the road you see cancer, heart attacks show up. So that's sort of the dominoes of how the toxins end up making us sick. The main ingredient of chelation is EDTA. And EDTA is a synthetic amino acid. I think the first patent was like in the 40s. And Abbott Labs actually had the patent in the 60s. So during the time the patent's active, they're able to make a lot of money. Basically they charge, if it costs a penny to make, they'll charge, dollars. And it's justified in a way because it costs a lot of money to research it. EDTA went off patent, like I said, in the 60s. So there's really no pharmaceutical company eager to make money from it. And so in a way, there's no money to be made from EDTA. It's made generic, it's relatively inexpensive. And because of that, it sort of fell through the cracks. And because EDTA is off patent, it's generic, there's no drug company to really push it. And that's really, I think, why it never really got developed.
I think every doctor did medicine because they wanted to help people. And when you start practicing medicine, you get overwhelmed pretty quickly. It's very busy. I think it's really difficult to go out of what you've been taught. It's very difficult. So it's a shift of thinking that needs to take place. And training. I think if we can get the medical schools, the studies that had been done, a lot of studies that had been done that were not published in the major peer journals because they weren't interested or they weren't supported by the drug companies, the pharmaceutical companies.
When you're trained a certain way and you know that way and you do that way, it's kind of a rut, I would say. It's just, this is how I learned to tie my shoes. Oh, but there's this other better way. Oh, yeah, but I know how to do it this way. Why change?
And my uncle, who had chelation therapy, he's a physician. He had a congenital heart defect, and he had to have a new valve placed. And there was a higher chance for that valve to become calcified. And so he received chelation therapy. For some reason, his surgeon in Holland felt that chelation therapy would be a good thing for him to prevent from the valve to get sick. And so he's had chelation therapy, and he felt so much better with it that he started investigating and started doing this. And he's done his own little studies in diabetic patients with eye problems. And he did a study on his own, out of his own pocket, where he'd proven with pictures of the retina of the eyes of these diabetic patients, where they showed improvement.
Before the government lets you do such a big study, they want to see if it's feasible. So the first study we did was called the pilot study to assess chelation therapy. It's called PACT. And we were able to show, and based on that demonstration project, then we were able to get the large study approved. Dr. Lamas even said, chelation, if you read any drug, there's always a lot of side effects. And chelation in the study turned out to be safer than even Tylenol. So it's very, very safe. When I first started 12 years ago, I hadn't worked with chelation that much. Actually, my wife, Angelique Hart, and her uncle had actually done chelation therapy in Holland for over 20 years.
My uncle told me that I should go to this meeting called ACAM. It's an organization for physicians that do alternative medicine and chelation therapy. It's the American College for the Advancement of Medicine. That's what it's called. And so they happened to have their yearly meeting in Fort Lauderdale, close to Miami. And Uncle wanted to go there, and he took me with him. And my husband said, I'd like a few days off with you guys in Fort Lauderdale. I'll go with you. So he went with us, and he sits there during lunch, and he looks up, and there's Dr. Lamas. Dr. Tony Lamas, major trialist, a lot of studies done, conventional medicine dude. And here he is sitting at the ACAM meeting.
Like in the late 40s and early 50s, there was a group of people that got exposed. Basically, the people who painted the ships got lead toxicity. There was another group of battery workers that got exposed to lead batteries, and they developed lead toxicity. So they invented EDTA to help those people, and it worked. But they also noticed that these people got better from their heart pains, their arthritis, their dementia, all these other sort of side effect benefits. And that was where and that's where they started investigating if it could really work. Yeah, so chelation is it's a treatment. So it's basically an IV bag of fluid in which you mix 10 elements. And most of the elements are vitamins. So there's vitamin C, vitamin B1, B6. And there's EDTA. EDTA is the active ingredient. It's an amino acid that pulls toxins out of the body. Over 100,000 people a year get chelation. It's usually 3 hours the infusion takes, so you usually get it in your vein of your hand. and the IV goes in over 3 hours. It's painless. You just relax and let it run through. It's usually 40 treatments, and people do 3 times a week usually. The molecule sort of looks like a little star, let's say, and the center of the star is protected. So when the molecule goes in the blood, anywhere it finds, so it has an affinity for lead. So anywhere it finds lead, it's going to pull it out of the tissue. It's like a little magnet or like a sponge or like we say it's like, it's able to pull it. Like, so chelation actually means claw. It comes from the Greek word for claw. And that's really how it's able to pull out the lead from the tissues. So it pulls it, it's in the middle of the star, and then it's able to go out through the kidneys. The body won't react to it anymore.
It's a main component, EDTA. Then most chelating doctors will use vitamin C, 7,000 milligrams, it's a good dose. They will use bicarbonate. Bicarbonate is used to balance the formula, to make the pH neutral. Vitamin B complex is often used as well. You need especially vitamin B12 to help with the detoxification process. So very important to give that. A little bit of heparin. Why? Well, it's to keep the vein open, to protect it from getting phlebitis and inflammation. So it's a tiny amount of heparin. And it's out of the system by the time you're done with the chelation, and a few hours later, the effect is totally gone. And magnesium. You need magnesium in there as well. So it's heparin, B complex, magnesium, bicarbonate, vitamin C, and the EDTA.
Basically, right now, if we had lead poisoning today, anywhere in the United States, if you went into the emergency room with lead poisoning, they would chelate you. It's the approved treatment for lead toxicity.
In people with hypertension, when you remove lead and after the chelation therapy, you're going to have an increase in nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is something that your cells produce, and it helps to relax the blood vessels. So if you do not have enough nitric oxide production, you're not able to relax your blood vessels, and your blood pressure is going to go up. So this might be the mechanism how chelation therapy, by removing lead that interferes with production of nitric oxide, leads to lowering of the blood pressure.
Actually, Angelique and I took the first 90 patients we had, and we looked at their lead levels and mercury and toxin levels before chelation and after chelation. And we saw the reduction in toxins, and that was really how we sort of convinced ourselves, okay, that's what's happening. And that's what it's approved for. EDTA is approved for lead removal. Most people have lead, mercury, arsenic, cadmium. These are toxins that are in the environment, are in the food, and the body accumulates those. And when those toxins are present, the body's not able to function as well. The energy source of every cell depends on something called mitochondria. So it's like the little battery of the cell. And these toxins muck up the mitochondria. So your cells aren't able to produce enough energy. And when the cells can't produce enough energy, they can't do what that cell was designed to do. And a lot of times the cells will become sick. They can't do their function, or can even become cancer. So that's really, toxicity is a big part of cancer and heart disease. When the toxins accumulate in the body, there's really no way to clear them, and chelation is able to clear it. The active part of chelation, like I said, is EDTA. EDTA was approved in 1967. It's still FDA approved for removing toxic metals, especially lead. That's what it's approved for. So there's a lot of theories how it works. I believe it just works by clearing the lead. The key is, though, lead is stored in the tissues or in the bones. So if you're not able to measure those, typically lead is measured by blood tests, and blood tests show 0 because it's not stored in the blood. So when you're able to clear the lead, the body functions much better. And that's what we found, and that's what the study showed. The study was not designed to show mechanism. It wasn't designed to show how it works. It was just designed to show if it worked. And so, future studies they're talking about will look into, how does it actually work and what are the mechanisms.
there's a lot of different things that one can do to detoxify. First of all, what goes in needs to be clean. So to me, organic food is very important. So I do think that we try to have organic foods as much as possible, or at least, clean them with water and soap. Your vegetables, your fruits, try to eat, meat sources from natural, environments, not so much processed food. Cleanses, the Swedes and the Finns, they know what to do. They do a lot of saunas. Well, sauna is a wonderful way to detoxify. You can get toxins out through your skin, out through your feces, out through your urine. So use the skin, sweat. If you can't afford a sauna, an Epsom salt bath, a tub. If you can soak in Epsom salt is another way to detoxify. If you juice with things like cilantro, parsley, those are wonderful ways. Cilantro is a really good mercury binding. So those are other cheaper ways of getting rid of toxins. Exercise. Why? When you exercise, you increase your circulation. When you increase your circulation, it's easier to get rid of toxins. Get it out of the tissues. We've done a lot of patients over the past 10 years, but we ended up at 85 where all those numbers were pristine. So we actually could look at that. And in all these patients, they were getting IV or oral chelation. And all these patients, we noted a lowering of cholesterol levels, a lowering of the blood pressure if they had high blood pressure, and a lowering of the toxic levels.
I've seen where plaque dissolves, where heart attacks are prevented, where people's blood pressure gets better, where their diabetes gets better, where Alzheimer's gets better. I mean, that's just the experience I've had with chelation.
To me, this is proof positive. The chelation therapy was certainly changing my life and changing it for the better.
And just my clinical anecdotes here are that people with arthritis, they tend to showing less arthritic pains. After about, again, 10 chelations, I deal with a lot of people with chronic fatigue. A lot of times energy levels improve. And these are things that I track.
Definitely lead was my largest one. And I don't remember the exact number, but let's see, my lead levels went back to about 1/10 the amount that they were when I first measured them.
I've seen really consistent pattern of things that happen after about 8 to 10 IV chelations. People with angina, they usually stop having angina or it reduces significantly. When people would come in with high blood pressure, after 8 or 10 chelations, blood pressure comes down consistently, and a lot of times I have to start lowering the blood pressure medication.
When I started doing the chelation, I was at 100, like I said, and after that, all that chelation that I received, my level went down to 0.
Starting to get off even more of the supplements, needing less. Done 40 chelations, the metal seems to have, I think seem to have gotten rid of it.
Dr. Hart and Hilbron have saved my life. And it's one of those things where you can't put a price on.
Now, for the diabetics, it should be a therapy that is part of, if you get your, glucophage or whatever medication for diabetes, you should be getting chelation therapy. I mean, 40%, that's a ridiculous good improvement. You need to get that. This should be mainstream medicine. This should play a very important role for many different diseases.
Dr. Hilbron had said, most people don't necessarily delve into things that deeply. And you think, why? I don't understand,
It is safe to do chelation therapy. It was on 1,700 patients, 1,700 plus. So hopefully 10 years from now, should be no question, no doubt about this. This should be mainstream therapy.
But I sense things are changing. And while I'm not totally cured now, I'm not walking with oxygen, and it's just a matter of time before I'm going to be finally free and be able to breathe again and play some golf.
The chelation study came out on Tuesday after nearly 5 months of waiting. The biggest thing I want everyone to know is the results. All these editorials and other papers published, no one mentions the results. and the results are very strong. So the first is there was a 26% benefit if you use chelation and high-dose vitamins versus placebo, 26%, okay? Second was just using chelation, there's an 18% benefit. Third, in diabetic patients, there was a 39% benefit. It reduced heart attacks by 23%, reduced stroke by 23%, reduced surgeries, meaning angioplasties, open heart surgeries, by 19%, reduced hospitalizations by 28%, and if you had had a heart attack in the front part of your heart, it reduced other heart attacks and other events 37%. Overall, it was 26% reduction, and then every subgroup we looked at had benefit. That's the biggest thing nobody is saying. A drug was approved that every patient in the world is on 15% benefit. And we showed more than 15% on every endpoint we looked at. That should be the headline of every article about TACT. And yet, every article, lesson learned. I mean, nobody mentions the result. Only Dr. Topol on the second page mentions the results and that every result was positive. Why are they going into all these other things when every single thing was helped? For them to be able to, obscure this result and to misreport all these reports, it came right from the top. The president of the American Heart Association, Dr. Adman, immediately was, we cannot recommend chelation at this time. If we had had a drug that showed a 26% benefit, I guarantee you every patient in the world would be recommended to be put on it. But because it's chelation, this weird kind of thing they don't understand, no, we have to say no to chelation. Even though they have a double-blind trial that proves it works. For years, show me the proof, show me the proof. Now we show the proof. Oh, no, I don't understand it. So then it's no. One was written by the editor-in-chief of JAMA, and it was very, very negative. Basically saying no to chelation and questioning if there is any benefit at all, in spite of all those statistics. His disclosure at the end of his article lists at least 8 pharmaceutical companies that he works for and receives money from. Even though to us $31 million for a study is a lot, we're talking billions of dollars in drug sales that would be reduced, trillions of dollars in surgeries, which the biggest benefit was in, surgeries reduction. So if you cut down how many surgeries people need, that would be loss of trillions of dollars to the hospitals. They don't want that. But the tragedy is the patients who have this condition, who are being deprived of this therapy, now proven, double-blind, randomized study, which is the best we can do, and now they're going to deprive all these people of this therapy.
To really suppress the real evidence, to really suppress to the public how significant this study is, and how that we actually should be doing chelation therapy, especially for the diabetics. So this has been, for me, to look at editorials from people that never had anything to do with chelation therapy, really don't know much about it, haven't witnessed it, how this works in patients, haven't seen the patients getting better from it, just absolutely destroying it, in fact. It's ridiculous.
The day the rebuttals came out, I was able, through the internet, to find where these doctors work, and I was actually able to get their email addresses and email them. So the main one who criticized the TACT trial at the American Heart Association, I sent him an email. I said, have you ever treated a patient with chelation? No. Have you ever had chelation personally yourself? No. Have you ever recommended it for somebody else? No. Have you ever learned anything about chelation, how to give it? No. The fact that most doctors do not know how chelation works shouldn't discredit chelation, should discredit the doctors that don't know. Clearly they don't want people to have chelation. Clearly they want to prevent people, misinform them about the benefits of chelation. And that's really the saddest thing. If you're a patient in this situation, to know that instead of a surgery that costs $250,000, you can get a treatment that costs about $4,000. So it's exponentially less expensive. The other thing is, over 300 doctors participated in the study. These are people that work with chelation every day, who have given chelation. Many have received chelation themselves. They've seen the results, same as we've seen results. I've had over 100 chelations personally. I've given over 10,000 chelations to patients. And, we were part of this trial. So, we really know what we're talking about. I don't come in to their situation, stents. Oh, this type of stent or that. I don't know anything about that. I would never come in and write an editorial saying, oh, that doesn't work. Because what do I know? And yet, that's what they've done to us. That's, just not right. Production of, this movie, hopefully people will get to see this movie. We're coming out with the book, so hopefully people can read the book or email us if they have any questions. Just that chelation is available. If you do have heart disease, there is a way to actually heal it other than medicine or surgery. That's really the next step, just for people to be aware that chelation is safe, it does work, and that you have a choice. I mean, if we can get that message, just everybody who has heart disease, they know that, and then they can choose what they want to do. But at least be aware that that's there. I think that's definitely the first step. I think the second step is, thank God for Dr. Lamas, continuing, the great researcher that he is. He'll continue to sort of chip away at the little parts they said. So how's the mechanism? So now he'll design some study to look at, for sure heavy metals, lead, some kind of study to prove how it works. Then it'll become mainstream. And then, you'll see chelation being used as often as aspirin is used now.